So now I've come to the part where I'm going to talk about virtual reality and the Virtual Experience Interaction Lab. And so I'd like to introduce my co-founder and partner, Rob Dongus from the University of Sydney. He's a PhD research student and lecturer in web design and technologies, and he's the technical director of Special Design Research Studio. Please help me welcome Rob Dongus.
Thanks, Susan. Really excited to be here and talk about virtual reality interaction design with you.
So, about 2 years ago, Rob and I met and we became interested in doing research in virtual reality. And over the years, we have put together a team to do a broad analysis of the VR landscape, to catalog existing design patterns in VR. We were curious, there are no real standards or accepted design patterns. So we were curious about, let's do a project of taking an analysis of what's out there, and from that build a framework for evaluation moving forward and start to catalog and document what we find, and also in the process obviously learn about interaction design in VR, what works, what doesn't work.
Yeah, so what's unique about us is that we are a team of volunteers and we're all participating in this project in order to learn not only more about VR and the industry, but also learn from each other with our subject matter expertise that we have amongst the group. We all have a passion for the technology and a passion for design, and we want to see how those two areas intersect in the VR space in order to create these opportunities for contribution or learning within the industry.
So we're a team of international professionals in the VR space. We're academics and professionals. That was one thing that was really intriguing about our collaboration. Rob is from the academic world and I'm a practitioner. And so we don't really know any research studies that kind of bring those two worlds together. And we also have diversity in terms of, where people live across the globe. We have diversity in culture. We have diversity in age and experience. And we really did that deliberately. Some of our team members are less experienced, but we wanted to have that fresh, young perspective. We thought that was really important.
Of course, with the diversity comes challenges, and we've had to face challenges in cooperating as a team across the globe. But luckily, we've implemented some very strong project management strategies in order to manage this. And you can see that from the roster of preferred times that people have for meetings that our project manager, Viviana, has to work out and arrange in order to best collaborate with this team.
So you saw in the previous slide that we have four groups, four teams of 5 people each, and we refer to those as pods. And so we need to coordinate global calls, and then we need to coordinate calls between the pods. And so we tried to put people in pods that had similar time zones. It's a lot to manage 20 people globally, and luckily we recently brought on a project manager that takes care of all that stuff for us.
So Susan's been talking a lot about spatial computing and the OpenAR cloud, and we've taken a little bit of a left turn to focus just on VR in this specific project, and I want to explain why we made that decision. One of the main reasons is due to the broad range of use cases available in the current VR market. We wanted to look across both industry verticals and real use cases that users engage with in the industry. We also did it based on our access to hardware as researchers. we found it a lot easier to distribute and get our hands on VR headsets as opposed to mixed reality or augmented reality headsets and hardware. And finally, we really wanted to make sure that with that spread of hardware, that the researchers would be able to access the same titles across the different platforms, be that Oculus, Vive, Windows Mixed Reality, or any other headset providers.
And that's one of the other things that we wanted to diversify is the hardware. We have people working on Vive. We have people working on Oculus Rift and Oculus Quest. We have people working on the mixed reality headsets. And we also have one Vive Eye and an Index user. So we're excited to get all of those perspectives as well.
Yeah, of course. Part of cataloging the entire VR landscape includes looking at all of the different hardware options on the market.
Or at least the main ones. So we're going to talk a little bit about how our study is set up. We're going to be looking at 72 titles for the length of the entire study.
And they're split across 12 use cases. We originally sourced and then adopted this list of use cases from the 2018 VR Intelligence Report, and we adapted them based on our observations on what currently is trending within the market, making sure that we'll have access to use cases that span across the industry verticals. For example, something like skills and training would be useful in any industry vertical. And so we're not limited to just industries. We can see how the different interaction patterns are present within these VR experiences in all the different components of the VR market.
And we really want to look at commercial titles as well as ones we can buy off of Steam or Oculus. So we are looking for contributors that want to give access to their titles that we might not otherwise be able to access. So if any of you are out there, keep that in mind. We'll talk about that a little bit more later also. And then for each use case, we found that we needed to create a persona. When we first did we did a single test early on, and through that prototype, we realized that we needed to have a persona so that we could answer the questions to the test based on a certain basic level of knowledge or understanding, and that we weren't just anybody. We weren't just anybody looking through the title. So some of the things that we are in our personas are, we have general demographics.
We've got the attitudes and opinions of the users that would be engaging with the VR experiences.
We took a look at what we felt would be the needs and requirements within a given use case category.
And specifically, we looked at some different accessibility considerations at a persona level to ensure that we're covering the full spectrum of the range of abilities and needs that our users have.
We also looked at the user's expected comfort level and experience.
And finally, we have the context of their VR use, which is important for us to understand where, why, and how the users are participating and interacting with the technology.
And getting a variety of different contexts was important because we want to capture as many different interaction and design patterns as possible. So as we mentioned before, we have 4 research teams of 5 people each. We refer to those teams as pods, and each pod has 4 researchers that will review the given title. And then we have one person who's a UX analyst who will summarize the data and help build the catalog that we're going to be creating along the way. And one of the reasons we created this role was because we had people interested in doing the study that didn't necessarily have access to a headset. We have two team members in India, neither of which have a headset. And so we've kind of created that role to be able to accommodate that. But what we really realized is that's a very extremely important role for when we get to the end, we're going to have this massive amount of data. And if we can have it sort of pre-organized, it'll make the final analysis that much easier. And as you can see on the slide, that each pod is responsible for 3 of the 12 use case categories, and we'll be looking at 6 titles in each use case.
Another thing that we found from our original proof of concept testing was the need for a test case, which for us is a series of steps that the researcher takes when evaluating the different VR experience. This is to go along with the user persona, and in conjunction provides us the assumed context and background knowledge that we should have going into the evaluations. The kind of things that we capture here range from how much of the experience they should participate with, which of the different menus and systems they should interact with, all the way through to how they should be recording and capturing that experience.
And we found this was really important because in our first proof of concept, everybody was kind of doing something different. And so it wasn't, reliable data. And it really taught us a lot in terms of putting these structures in place to move forward and have solid data that's consistent.
Our timeline for conducting the research will span over the next 36 weeks of 2021, and we'll be aiming to complete a title every 2 weeks. And so part of this cadence of testing allows us to regroup and have a series of calls to align the team throughout the research.
So for each title, every 2 weeks, there's a team call where the pod call actually, where the pod gets together and they discuss their findings and they plan for the next call. They talk about building the test case for the next title. And, the UX analyst is on all those calls as well. So if there's any questions, that can be answered. And then we do once a month, we do a global call with the entire team. And then on that, a third week, we're doing a coordination call with the pod leaders, the pod coordinators, so that we're always checking in and making sure that we're collecting consistency, everybody's understanding things in the same way, and our data is consistent. So after we did the initial one sort of prototype, we realized we had these issues and we went back and we built their personas and we built the test cases. And then we decided what we needed to do is we should do a test across every single category, one test again across all 12 categories, just to make sure we're not missing anything. And so, Rob, can you tell us about these screen captures?
Yeah, so the pre-test resulted in a wealth of data, both in terms of the researchers' evaluations, in terms of heuristics, their feelings of presence and immersion, and then also in terms of the resources or the screen captures that we were able to use to identify the patterns that they were referring to throughout their evaluations. And this organization of the screenshots made it really clear to us that we didn't quite understand how to categorize all of the patterns just yet. And although we had based our original evaluation on traditional usability heuristics and known measurements of feelings like presence and immersion, we still didn't have a really clear way of organizing all of the design patterns that we were identifying and grouping them under common names and taxonomies.
And we also realized that the team needed more guidance in terms of what video to capture and then what screen captures to take from the video capture. So again, it was all such a big learning experience of where the inconsistencies were and what we needed to do to improve the guidelines and the training to bring the team together. So in order to build a UI taxonomy, we wanted to build it on secondary research. So we had a list of resources that I'll share with you in a minute that our committee, we broke up the research and we all did a piece of it in order for us to come up with a categorization and strong definitions of those categorizations so that we could analyze any interface regardless of the title and be able to kind of put it in one framework, which is really challenging if you think about all the different varieties of titles that are out there. So this was a big challenge, but it was really important for us to have this framework for evaluation, for us to be able to make good sense of the data and really have insights that were meaningful. So how we did this is we looked at the VR book from Jason Gerald, who spoke just before me. We also looked at a book of 3D user interfaces by Laviola and co-authors. We looked at Brave Nui World NUI by Wigder and Wixon. We also investigated Mike Algers and looked at the Microsoft MRTK design documentation. And so we looked at particular chapters that were specifically about interface design. We all took our notes. We took our notes and we created these mind maps. Then we took the mind maps and we actually rearranged them and we regrouped them. And then from those regrouped, categorized mind maps, we decided what information was relevant to the work we were doing and what wasn't. And then we pulled it all together and created a comprehensive outline of data points to put into our tests. And the other thing that we found was challenge is in our first test, we had a lot of open-ended questions and people didn't always really know how to answer them. And, you know, the data was really inconsistent. So what we did on this time around is we really worked hard to have it be structured data that's easy for the researchers to complete, but it also, because of the way we did it, also required a fairly specific understanding of the categorizations that we created and what those definitions are. So we're actually still in the process of developing a companion to the test to make sure that the researchers really understand the context from which we're coming from. When we built the test, we built the test as a committee. So there was a lot of discussion over the specificity of the categories and what things meant. So we're going to be having a couple of sessions of training to make sure, in addition to the companion, to make sure everybody really understands what we meant when we created the categories. And then again, like we said before, we're going to have these monthly check-in calls from a global sense, and then the coordinators from each pod will have a monthly call to make sure that everything is in sync and going on track as expected.
On the data side, we had a lot of challenges as well that came out of the pre-test that we came together as a committee in order to solve. One of those challenges was all of the work that the UI committee had done to generate this amazing outline with a comprehensive list of dynamic and conditional questions. We needed a way to then create an evaluation format that matches and allows for that style of question to be asked and answered by the researchers. So we made the move away from Google Forms, which we started with, and are now exploring Qualtrics as a much more logical based option for our surveys that the researchers complete. The other part of the problem for the data team was ensuring that we had a consistent capturing of the experiences that the researchers were participating with. And so this started with some basic training on the use of OBS as a tool to record the screen, making sure that we were recording a full screen view, not the split screen view with two eyes, and that all of our researchers' evaluations would be recorded at a consistent dimension and resolution. This then transitioned into creating a tool to take those video recordings and allow the UX analysts to snip out individual screenshots or even GIFs from that overall video, and then follow up that with a coding process and the sorting process of the output images that we saw before in the screen cap image. Lastly, with the data team, we need to make sure that our data is consistent and reliable amongst researchers, and we've hinted at this throughout the presentation, but we're conducting training and providing onboarding tools and documents in order to upskill the researchers, making sure that they understand all of those definitions that we've agreed upon before then conducting the evaluations, so that our data can be accurate but still broad in its reach.
So we've obviously felt that as user experience designers, it was important to address accessibility issues, even though we don't expect there's a lot of conformity in terms of accessibility. So we brought on a consultant, Thomas Logan from Equal Entry, who that's his area of specialty. And he suggested that he wants to look at what's positive rather than bashing all the places where titles are not thinking about accessibility. We want to look for titles that are thinking about it and really take those opportunities. And we're going to actually do some usability studies with people of varying disabilities to really have to really be able to provide a good experience, to help understand what's required to provide a good experience. And we want to understand what it takes to implement inclusive design in VR so that we can contribute to that discussion. We know that there are people looking at it, and we want to be a part of that conversation.
Yeah, for us, accessibility should not be an afterthought in the design process, and we want to make sure that we find the opportunities and strategies that designers and developers can take in order to maximize the usability of their experiences with a large audience.
As we hinted at before, we're looking for creators, developers, designers, producers that have titles that they'd be interested in being a part of our evaluation. And as we're all volunteers, in order for us to have access to 72 titles across all 20 of our team members, we are looking for people to support our effort and contribute your title. And again, we're looking for a wide variety between commercial and consumer. So if you are interested in supporting our effort and being a part of this, having your title evaluated, it's an opportunity for you in addition to being a part of the study. And we'll give you credit on as a contributor on our website, all of our marketing material, any publications that we do, but more importantly, you have access to an evaluation.
In addition to that, any consultants that have subject matter expertise in the particular areas we've mentioned, like interaction design, accessibility, even in some areas that we haven't mentioned, like haptics and spatial audio, we'd love to discuss with you how you can be involved as well and bring that expertise into our evaluations to make sure that the output, when we start to catalog these patterns and provide guidelines and principles for good user experience design in virtual reality experiences, that all of that information is captured there as well.
So find us at Virtual Experience Interaction Lab, veilab.org. That's the same place you'll find us on LinkedIn. And our Twitter account is VEI_lab. So thank you so much for coming to our talk today.